So this morning, welcome to the investment fair and to this really excellent set of meetings that have been going on all week. Again, thank you for joining us on this. Good afternoon and good evening to those of you in different time zones, and thank you for joining us for, I think it's the last day of the investment fair. This morning, we're going to have a policy spotlight on refining sustainability reporting. As many of you know, corporate sustainability disclosure is really the cornerstone of sustainable investing. If companies don't provide meaningful information on their environmental and social impacts, investors won't have the information they need to invest sustainably. The good news, the positive news, is that in one sense, sustainability reporting by companies has now become mainstream. In 2020, 92% of S&P 500 companies published a sustainability report compared to only 20% in 2011. But quantity is not enough, quality also matters. And the quality of corporate sustainability disclosure is currently inadequate. The challenges are well known. I'll highlight four. The first is lack of comparability across companies. The second is voluntary and selective disclosure. The third is outdated and backward-looking data. And a fourth challenge is having many competing reporting frameworks. There are, however, recent developments which could help address some of these longstanding issues. In particular, the launch of the International Sustainability Standards Board, ISSB, which was created by IFRS, the International Financial Reporting Standards Foundation, in 2021 seeks to achieve convergence among existing reporting frameworks, and we will discuss that in today's session. But more progress will still require leadership from policymakers in particular on three main questions. One is mandatory versus voluntary reporting. The second is public versus private markets to avoid regulatory arbitrage. And the third is the issue of single versus double materiality, to only focus on the impact of SDG and climate risks on enterprise value. Do we only focus on that in single materiality, or do we also look at the impact of enterprise activity on the SDGs in reporting? The GISD Alliance, the Global Investors for Sustainable Development, has put forward recommendations on SDG-related disclosures. There are 8 concrete calls to action that could inspire policymakers. For example, GISD members recognize that reporting on metrics must be complemented by targets, and they committed to work towards identifying appropriate SDG-related targets at the company level. And in addition, because reporting needs differ by sectors, or can differ by sectors, the GISD Alliance also identified the need for sector-specific metrics and developed SDG-aligned sector-specific metrics for 8 sectors. This morning's panel is going to discuss these issues in more depth. We have a very exciting and very knowledgeable group of panelists that really represent a wide range of actors in the space. So we're going to start with, we have 2 CFOs from different sectors, Mr. Alberto De Paoli, the CFO of NL, and Mr. Nilanjan Roy, the CFO of Emphasis, who are going to give us company perspectives. We also have Mr. Niels Boomstrand, the CEO of Nordea Asset Management, who will give an investor perspective. And then we have Ms. Marty McBrien, the Managing Director of the Climate Disclosure Standards Board, which is now part of IFRS. So without much further ado, we'll go to our panelists. And we're going to start with Mr. Alberto De Paoli, the CFO of NL, and also the co-chair of the UN Global Compact CFO Coalition, which we will maybe get to discuss some of those issues in a second round of questions. But let's start with my first set of questions to Mr. De Paoli. I really want to break it down into 2 parts for our audience, because we do have a wide range of different types of audience members. It would be good to first start with looking just in general as an energy company, to tell us a little bit about the progress and challenges by NL towards sustainability. I know that when you started at NL, you were the CFO of NL Green Power. So maybe let's start by talking just about the progresses and challenges towards sustainability. And then the second part of the question is to go through some of the challenges you are encountering when reporting on your sustainable activities and how you are addressing them. So, Mr. DePaoli, over to you. So our first technical difficulty of the morning, but while we try to solve that, because we don't have too much time, maybe we can switch the order of our speakers, and then we can try to, I don't know if, Alberto, if you need to jump out and jump back in, if that would help, or if you're, but yeah, I can't, okay, so why don't we, in the meantime, what we'll do is I'll go over to Mr. Roy, the CFO of Infosys, and I'm going to ask you the same sorts of questions, and then we'll go back to Mr. DePaoli in a few minutes. But first, how is Infosys and the IT sector more broadly incorporating sustainability into its own operations? Let's start there. Then, how do you approach sustainability reporting internally, and what lessons have you learned along the way? And then finally, we'll ask you, but let's answer those two parts of the question first. So over to you, Mr. Roy.
Thanks, Shari. It's a delight to be part of this panel and also be part of the alliance member of GISD. So the IT services sector of which Infosys is a part is fundamentally helping our clients, which are largely Fortune 500 companies, in their digital transformation journeys. And today, if you don't have a digital transformation vision in your vision statement, probably the stock markets are going to knock you off about 5 percentage points. So everybody has digital transformation as part of their visions, and this basically encompasses the entire value chain across customer acquisition, retention, experience, supply chain, talent management, finance, efficiencies, etc. So it runs across the gamut of the entire organization. And at the heart of digital transformation, I think we fundamentally believe that the idea is about sustainability and building organizations for the long run. On our part, and the industry, in fact, over the last 2 years has seen a massive acceleration, partly because of COVID, as consumers have started interacting with their brands in different ways. And therefore, digital transformation has really come to the core. We, on our part, for instance, have hired 85,000 people in the last year, college graduates across the world. We've hired about 3,000 odd college graduates as a company in the United States as well, just in the last 1 year. So there's a huge resurgence in terms of this transformation, which we are seeing. And of course, over the last few years of this company's, we've been about 40 years since our existence. Our reason for existence largely is about profit with purpose. And it's one of the few companies which has been recognized by Forbes as the most respected company, the third most respected company in the world. So we have 40% of our 320,000 workforce are women across the globe. We are then with about 160 nationalities, about 45 countries. In 2020, we turned carbon neutral as a company. We got a UN Global Climate Action Change Award on climate from the United Nations, and a lot more which we continue to do because we think this is a journey we are part of. Now, coming specifically to the ESG side, we were doing a lot of work over the last many years. But I think in 2020, the board said that we have to stitch it all together in our ESG vision and really start looking at the materiality lens through which we need to really say where we're going to be headed. And fundamentally, we are a technology and a people services company. And therefore, I think over a period of 6 months, we set our 2030 roadmap. And there were 3-4 things which we learned along the way. And of course, one of the most obvious is having time-bound targets, for instance. Number 2 is that this is a journey, and therefore it has to be dynamic. So, for instance, this happened in the middle of the pandemic, and because of that, we've put hybrid working as a big part of our future vision in terms of how we will operate, right? And this was a term probably 2 years back, none of us even knew it existed. But with such a large workforce, giving the flexibility to employees, hiring talent across from different cross sections of society, enabling women to come in, I think a hybrid sort of work model really works for us. So there are some things which we realized will actually evolve as we go down this journey. The 2 other, I think, lessons for us really is how do you build this whole materiality concept of what is unique to your business model. And of course, the GISD Alliance paper fundamentally addresses that, the sector-specific metrics which have been laid out. In a way, are a sort of a compass for many companies to say where do they start their journey of reporting, what is relevant for their industries and therefore pick up that thread. I mean, as an IT services company, if I start reporting on, say, plastic consumption and ignore something more like human talent development, I'd probably be doing injustice. And that's the whole idea of having your own unique story and what is relevant for your company and building that. So that was a sort of a learning for us. It took us some time to get grips around that. And I think the fourth one was, how do we integrate sustainability into fundamentally business process design from day one, right? And usually earlier we were seeing that, the ESG budget was sitting outside. It was not core to business process. And I think the realization is that long-term value creation can only be possible if you build in sustainability into everything that you do. So into your sales, into your revenue practice, and we can talk about that, into your cost structures. How does it help in your margins? How does it help in your long-term revenue? So I think, in a way, sustainability by design is very, very core. And in that sense, if that is internalized by all parts of the organization, that you have to think sustainability as part of all your business processes, as part of solutions which you're offering to the client, you really can actually add long-term financial value. So we don't see a dichotomy around shareholder value creation and stakeholder value creation, because I think they're inextricably linked. So that's been this journey for us.
Great. That's great. That's a great answer and a great way to start the conversation. I have a follow-up question, which is, because as an IT company, do you also help other companies with reporting? Is that part of the business model? And if so, what are the lessons you're learning from that?
Yeah, so I think, again, coming back to, what is good business is also good for business, right? So in a way, we started a sustainability practice at a wider sense in the company, helping our clients with their sustainable, overall sustainability ideas. But specifically on reporting itself, we have a sustainability business unit, which actually does in two types. We have ESG as a service and also ESG data and analytics, right? So basically ingesting data from actually from sources where you don't have data available. So like emissions data may not be easily available, in computers, etc. So you have to put low code sensors across plants, etc., to capture, for instance, emissions data. That's one example, right? How do you ingest the data, clean up that data, and then get analytics out of that? So a lot of work on that. We are helping clients, for instance, one global asset management company, in building an ESG risk scorecard across their portfolio of 30 investments which they have, and what is their risk factor in that. With another company, we have worked on a complete ESG as a service transformation, where from the strategy to implementation of strategy to reporting, the entire thing we take over. So these are some examples on the reporting side. But overall, on the broader sustainability, there's a lot of work we're doing. We've combined and partnered with one of the largest oil and gas majors in the world on energy as a service, to make sure that energy and carbon reduction can be offered as a service to our clients. With one of the largest automobile manufacturers in the world, we've tied up and actually shifted their data centers. And data centers is a big issue in terms of emissions. And in fact, shifted the entire data center to a green data center in an abandoned mine in Norway, right? And which is cooled by natural ice water. So these are the kind of solutions people are looking at. So the broader sustainability, of course, is very core to us and how we offer those solutions. But also ESG as a reporting, we think there's a lot of value we can add as well.
That's great. So, and it's actually a good transition back to, I hope, Mr. DePowerly, that we can hear you now. Do you want to unmute and we can test it? Not yet. Well, while you're working on that, the question is the same as it was before. Oh, great! I think we can hear you now. So really, to just
Can you
first, yeah, perfect. We can hear you. That's great. So first,
okay, you can hear me?
an energy company, about progress and challenges towards sustainability, and then the challenges you're encountering with reporting as well. So over to you. Thanks.
Okay, sorry about these technical issues.
No problem. It happens.
So I think we have a similar history on another sector. So we were doing sustainability before 2015 in a different way. So we had some sustainable reports. We choose some SDGs target, not related with our business. So something that was in the area of I don't know, charity, or because we were been asked to do something. The inception date was at the end of 2015, where we decided to change completely the approach and to try to find and to change our business models to have sustainability within a business model. With only one slogan: sustainability is value. So seeking value and creating value through a sustainable business model. This was the very change that we made in the concept of the business we had. And we found along the way huge value, because we found a way to define how to pursue sustainability and in creating value is something that in our sector, for our things, our business, is good. And so we got 100% increase in our equity value in 3 years after having done this. There are so solid and rock solid results of this change. Clearly, the very point was define a new business model. And every sector has a specific business model to be redesigned in that way. Not all the sectors has the same targets, because not the target are related to a value increase. When we say that we are reducing emissions, for us is an overall business model that results in reducing emission, but is creating value with sustainability. With other sector, it may not be the center of the new sustainable business model reducing emissions. They may have other kind of sustainable targets that will increase their specific business. And clearly, the second is how to report to markets and communities and all the stakeholders involved this change, and now this change is good for the sustainable target, but also for the company and the value created. This is more or less what we have done. Along this path, we invented the new financial instruments like the SDG linked bond. That is a way in which we said sustainability is not doing some projects. Sustainability is doing a sustainable business. So financial instruments have to be linked to a purpose, not to a specific project. This is the way in which, and everything we did within this field calls for a clear report on target, on how effectively this target is pushing the business. And this is more or less what we have done and what we are doing. And then we will after discuss about reporting and a specific question on the site.
Right, that's great. I mean, it would be great to really now to talk a little bit about the challenges on reporting. Have you had any specific challenges? Have you thought about, what a sector-specific metrics would look like versus, what others in your sectors are doing? So have you thought through, are you having challenges on the reporting side?
Well, yes. So first of all, we had we followed a very heterogeneous representation between sectors. We do think, and also it's a challenge that we are pursuing at the CFO task force, because what we are doing is exactly first induce also in other companies, in other sectors, to find a way to combine sustainability and business. So to find a strategic perspective that are combining the two things and putting these two things in an optical of creating value. The second is that we have some general reporting around sustainability. This usually is not linked to the business. So it's not into the financial language. It's something that you have, but you can describe your sustainable business with this kind of general way to report on sustainability. Clearly, this way is to be found in a sector way to represent the sustainability within the business. So this is lacking. And the second that is lacking is that we think that we have to have that. Now we have a lot of standards. So we have been reporting under GRI mainly, but today, so we did in the past with the financial results on IFRS, something that will give a clear path to everyone, and then on a sector specific related to the business you do, is so the main things that we think are relevant to be found in the next years.
Okay, great. That's really helpful. And I think that from these two perspectives, from the corporate side, it'll be really interesting now to hear the perspective of an investor who may look at and use sustainability reporting in investment decisions. And so again, Mr. Bomstrand, maybe to first just introduce your company a little bit, to give some background on the Nordia Asset Management's investment strategy, what asset classes you invest in, and whether sustainability issues are integrated across your portfolios, or do you have separate ESG portfolios? So how do you think about sustainable investing? And then we'll get to the second part of the question on reporting.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here as well. So Nordea Asset Management is it's a predominantly European asset manager. We run around 270 billion euros. It's that these days that number seems to change every day more than what it has historically. But so it's a significant amount, and we have been operating within the sustainability world for probably around 30 years in various ways. Our ambition has been for a long time to integrate sustainability into the investment process. Having said that, there are still products that are where it is more pronounced than what it will be in other products, and this is also driven by the marketplace to a large degree. I think that what we have seen happen over the last 4 to 5 years, and especially in the last 24 months, is a big shift where this actually became mainstream, and where it became demanded by clients as well. And I think that is also the real strength in the movement, is that it's not coming top down, it's not coming policy wise, it's coming bottom up. But having said that, I still believe that we can't disregard the fact that many of the issues that we're facing are broad, they are global, which means that it takes multilateral agreements amongst politicians to actually effectuate change. I don't think that it can be done purely by the financial industry or by the various industries themselves as well.
Which really highlights this question of, what is the role of policy in the end? And all of this movement that's happening, how can it inform policymaking to make it sort of smarter? But let's then focus for a second on the reporting side. So do you use sustainability reporting in implementing your strategy? How do you use it? And are you able to work with companies? Do you find it to be challenging to use it? And yeah, so let's start there.
So if we start there, so we're an active house. What that means is that we don't follow indices. We do bottom-up fundamental analysis on all the companies that we invest into, also the sovereigns on the debt side. And it's very natural, and has been very natural for us to see that, okay, we're moving, and the whole world is moving into a place where the sustainability reporting is simply just a part of the environment in which these companies operate. So finding that data and understanding that data, that's fundamental to the valuation of the companies themselves. And this is what we mean by integrating it into our investment strategies and our investment processes. Having said that, then that also means that what we in the financial industry ideally would want is, we want quantitative data, we want time series, and preferably we would like to have it audited as well. And if I can be so blunt as to say that the more marketing oriented sustainability reporting with glossy folders, brochures, and nice pictures, they do very little in terms of telling us what are the challenges this company will face, how will policy shifts impact their business. It is the hardcore financial data, and preferably run out of the financial departments, because that's also where the quality control for data is normally the best.
Great. And quickly, I have two more really follow-up questions, because one would be, do you also measure the impact on your portfolio? Do you do your own reporting, your own sustainability reporting?
Yes, we do, and this will also be developed given the European legislative framework that is from SFDR and the auxiliary regulations that are coming out. And generally speaking, I would say that the climate challenge that we're facing has almost hovered a bit above all of the other SDGs, and that's where the reporting started and where it's gone the furthest as well. And I think us as an industry and also the wider industries, we're still finding our feet in exactly what should we be reporting on, how do we secure the data we need in order to be able to report as well. And the last thing I'd like to say on it as well, I think it's very, very important that we as an industry, that we find common standards, because I can only imagine how difficult it is to be on the other side of all of these requests that are coming in for data, for reporting, and various players wanting it in various formats. And we need to get to a point where we can standardize it so it's easy, or at least reasonable, for the corporates to produce this data and to produce it with quality.
Great, that's great. And so it sounds like as a European investor, you actually appreciate the European legislation that's coming to think about, or is it something that you worry about?
So as always, when you get very comprehensive legislation, there are concerns, but there's also benefits. And I believe I believe that we're moving in the right direction. The question is, will the regulation be effective, and will it push us in the direction that we believe we should be pushed in, or will it turn into more of a tick the box exercise in order to have an audit trail on what you've done and what you haven't done? And I think there is my main concern with very, very detailed regulation. But at the same time, I would say it's not going to be enough to regulate and legislate within the financial industry. That will only, I don't know if the cost of capital for companies will be affected enough to create true shifts, but it's a start. And then I think it's about finding multilateral agreements and reaching conclusions on how do we as a globe address the SDGs, and how do we jointly come to legislation and come to find a way of supporting.
Right. It's always this really difficult challenge of how do you get legislation that moves us beyond the greenwashing,
Yeah.
but does it in a way that is not overly burdensome and doesn't become more greenwashing or just meaningless because nobody is able to really use it because it's too detailed in the wrong way sometimes. But so this question of getting the legislation right. But one last follow-up question for you in our first round is, you mentioned that this is being demanded by clients more and more. And my question is, do you yet have ways to measure that, to understand that, to be able to better align your portfolios with client demands? You know, how do you interact with clients to better understand what their sustainability preferences are? And I say this because in part, you know, I think a lot of people who are interested in investing sustainably still have challenges getting through the greenwashing and finding investment vehicles that are sustainable and in a meaningful way. Yeah, go ahead.
So there are two aspects in this. One is, how do we communicate and deal with retail clients, which is much more difficult because there's millions and millions of them. On the other hand, we have the institutional framework where we talk directly to our institutional clients. And I actually think that they are moving and have moved quite rapidly in this direction. And it almost doesn't matter if we're talking about North America, if we're talking about Europe, or if we're talking about Asia, it is in existence in all the regions across the globe now. And I think in some parts, it's moving more rapidly through the investors than it is through the government. In other parts, it's moving more rapidly through policy than through investors. But what we have found is that it is in those discussions where we explain what can we do, how will we work with this, that they express their preferences, and we're also able to tailor products to the larger institutional investors in this space, which we have done in both in Asia, in Europe definitely, and in the US for pension pools, for example, where they have very strong views. Also in Canada. On the retail side, there we need to standardize because we're not able to bespoke build it, and then it is about standardizing it for the clients and giving them optionality.
And the growing interest you're seeing, do you see it on looking solely, well, first of all, I presume it's mostly climate oriented, but you can answer that. But second of all, do you see it mostly focused on the impact, going back to this question of double or single materiality, do you see it mostly focused on sort of climate risks and SDG risks on enterprise value, or do you see that there's also a growing interest in the impact of activities on climate and the SDGs?
The boring answer is that it's actually both. I think there is definitely the risk side, but there's also definitely the more progressive side. And I think we need to be realistic and recognize that the world needs energy and the world will need energy going forward. We have a time period during which we will have to find a way of creating energy in a sustainable fashion, but that it's not an overnight activity. And that also means that the risk side is there, but it's also about supporting the people who are moving most rapidly, who are showing that they have their ideas and that they have their ideas and business models of the future. And then it's also about talking to the laggards and talking to, okay, why do we as investors find this important? And then be open with our clients about what are we doing and how are we doing this.
Right. That's so you would, and then I'm actually going to, before going to Marty McBrien, I'm going to go to ask but hold on one second. So Niels, when you so you would you, so for you, sort of this sort of transition reporting would be important as well, is what I'm sort of getting from you, is that this question of being able to report on how companies are transitioning is as important as the absolute other pieces of this. Is that correct?
Very much so. I think that it's about finding the progressive forces in each sector.
Right. And so maybe before going to you, Marty McBrien, for 1 second, just to go back to Mr. DePaoli, to say, you know, what your thoughts are in terms of reporting on transition, and if that's something where your company is thinking of that, and how you're thinking of sort of this transition reporting.
Well, I said before, so it's the transition reporting is a part of the overall reporting of how a company is changing its business model to endorse sustainability within. So it's so transition is something that is relevant because it's based on a step ahead of companies on a different perspective. And so to give you an example, also to represent something that also Niels can look at. So I'm giving you an example on our experience when we were marketing the new SDG linked bond at the very beginning. So that was the new instrument. The instrument is easy. So we choose a sustainable target, and we say we are gonna reach this target in a certain number of years, so 5, 7, 3 years. And I'm asking a discount on the cost of debt you are giving me, and I'm giving back to you this discount, I say 20, 25 basis points, if I will not match the target I have assumed. So when we were marketing this new concept the demand from investors was, well, okay, I am a sustainable fund. What I have to hope you will do, because if you miss the target, I'm earning more. If you match the target, you are saving the world. So I don't know. So I am in this gray zone. That's not correct, because the very proposition we had is if we will have a lower level of emissions, it is linked to a higher level of profits and a low level of risk. So in our proposition, I'm asking a discount because if I follow the sustainable target, my company will be more profitable and less risky. So this is the prospect we had. Clearly, this is something that has to be found in every kind of business, and it has to be follow the transition that every company have to do. If we will stick to green bonds, no transition is possible, because green bond is asking some projects to be financed, not a transition path.
Right. That's so interesting. And when the demand for the bond, was it mostly from ESG type investors, sustainability investors, impact investors, or did you find demand from the wider investor universe?
The most at the beginning was on ESG investors, but not 100%. So we had also normal funds in 30% buying into this business, these bonds at discount versus the plain vanilla bond that we were issuing at the same time. So we experienced this sustainability discount in this first issuance, and also in the issuance we made after.
Oh, that's great. Very, very interesting. So we're going to turn to Ms. McBrien to tie all of this together. But first, so Ms. McBrien is the Managing Director of the Climate Disclosure Standards Board, which has been now merged with IFRS, the financial reporting standards, the International Financial Reporting Standards Foundation. I hope I got that right. So the first question, I just think for the audience, to just give an overview of IFRS's work, the Climate Disclosure Standards Board's work, and why it's important in this bigger ecosystem. What is everyone doing? Let's just start there to bring everyone, so everyone understands what your work is and why it's so important.
Well, thanks, Sherry, and it's a pleasure to be here. So we're I'll go back. The International Financial Reporting Standards Board, who we've known for the last 20 plus years, have gone out to set accounting standards, and they did that harmonizing the world of accounting standards by that, which had many of the characteristics we've seen and heard about from on sustainability reporting today. They were fragmented, they were different regulation, they weren't producing consistent, comparable, decision useful information for investors. In some cases they were unregulated. They're using that 20 plus years of experience to now go ahead and set sustainability standards for financial decision useful financial information on sustainability issues for capital markets. So as part of doing that, they work very closely with IOSCO and existing sustainability standard setters over the last few years to start to consolidate all the knowledge and thinking that had been out there, to allow them at the climate talks in Glasgow last year in November to announce the formal establishment of the International Sustainability Standards Board, and that was after lots of market consultation. With that, they announced that they would consolidate 3 existing frameworks and standards into that new board. One was the Climate Disclosure Standards Board. I'm pleased that acronym no longer exists. It has been sunset, and its work has been wrapped into the foundation here. We've got rid of one, and we're going to get rid of 2 more in principle at the end of June, and that is the Value Reporting Foundation Sustainability Accounting Standards Boards and the Integrated Reporting Framework have also been brought in, but we haven't just done that. We're also working very closely with the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures and the WEF IBC metrics. So we've been tying all of these frameworks and standards in the market into one set of standards, which I'm delighted to say are currently out for consultation to the market, and we need your feedback. So 2 standards went out for consultation, if I may. So we have been extremely busy. I do look tired. There is a reason. You all know there's a lot to do when you're bringing these together, but it's for a good reason, right? So we have 2 out for the market. We have a general requirements standard that's out, and that kind of is sort of the catch-all, the how do I report on any sustainability issue to capital markets and to your investor via the mainstream reporting channel that you would use to report your financial information in your jurisdiction to investors. So that's the overarching standard. We then have 2 pieces that accompany that, but one that's out for consultation. I'll kind of describe it as 2, but it is 1. We have the climate standard. So the climate standard brings TCFD in. So it's all of this is built off TCFD. So if you think of the 4 core elements of TCFD, governance, strategy, risk management, metrics and targets, they're the 4 core elements that run through all the standards here. So we really have built of what market is market practice and what market's currently doing. And so we have a climate standard, which is TCFD. So you will see the transition plans we've heard in there. You will see scope 1, 2, and 3. You'll see a lot of things that you're very familiar with from the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure recommendations, or what you might have been reporting to CDP, or what you might have been reporting using the Climate Disclosure Framework. You know, none of this has been reinvented. It's just been stitched together and made to make sense, obviously, and aligned with international accounting standards where relevant. We then have cross-industry metrics, and then we have sector-specific metrics, which are drawn directly from the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. So we've siloed all this together. So we have the 2 standards out at the market with the market for feedback until the end of July. So please, everyone on here, tell us what you think. I can't say it enough. We need the best brains on this, right? And because we hope these standards will form the global baseline for sustainability disclosure and work closely with if you like, shareholder materiality and GRI in close alignment, as well as with jurisdictions that are currently putting wider, sustainability reporting requirements in, such as the SEC in the US, and we've heard about Europe at the moment. So there's an awful lot of alignment we're doing in this to make it, to produce the most consistent, comparable, useful information for all the investor communities, but make it as easy as we can for preparers. Because, at the moment, you can often have to present 3 or 4 or 5 different sets of data to satisfy everyone's needs. And we want one data point to be able to use, whether you're picking up a GRI standard or an ISSB standard, and allow that sort of flexibility within that. So it's extremely exciting, and we hope it's going to tackle many of these fragmentation points that you brought up at the beginning.
Great, that's really great. And so I wonder if you answered the second part of my question already, so I won't go there. But there's a first of all, it's very exciting what you're doing. So I think that the fact that this is happening really shows incredible movement that is really positive. I'm wondering if you're thinking, what you think of challenges of moving away from climate disclosures to reporting more broadly on sustainability and SDG type issues, if that's on the table and where the thinking is. And then also there's this difficult question of thinking about only reporting on risks for enterprise value, or thinking more broadly, and how you're thinking about those questions. Sure.
So to the first part of the question around the future, like what does beyond climate? So what's really helpful about this whole consolidation is it brings with most of that ESG ecosystem already in one way or another. So you have the SASB standards, which are quite broad. You have CDSB, we covered in great detail, climate, biodiversity, water, and social issues. So now the foundation has all of this great IP already built in that it can start from. Now, but the next step for us is, because we have a due process to follow, I can't assume what the next topic will be. We have a consultation that will go out in the summer, which will ask the market, what should we do next? What are the most important themes for us to work on? What's the most important areas? And we will be following the outcomes of that. So once the new board is in place, which we hope will be finalized by the end of Q3, that board will then deliberate and set out the agenda that we will follow. But like I said, there's a lot of good work already out there on lots of different standards. So there's actually no reason to stop, because all of this is built off those. So this is not a moment to stop. This is a moment to do more, and have a really good think about what you are doing, and using the exposure drafts as they're out as a very good guide to get you started and to start to move in those directions. So if you're already doing SASB standards for your sector, don't stop. If you're already doing TCFD, don't stop. My advice is to do more, think about it more. How are you properly embedding it across the business? Are you linking it to the financial statements? Because we know, that's an area that still needs an awful lot of improvement. On linking it with shareholder sustainability, one of, as I kind of touched on earlier, one of the key parts of this is we do touch on enterprise value. We do go into opportunities as well. We go across into that very much in line with TCFD. We do ask for opportunities to be reported as well. But we are very aware that there is sort of the impacts and the dependencies lens, if you like, on the stakeholder and shareholder value. And that's why we're really working closely with GRI on this, because we do just deal with enterprise value, and we do need to provide the connectivity between the two groups, if you like, to allow information to move. We are looking short, medium, and long term here, as we talked about earlier. And so we need that information, if it does become material or could be material in the future, to move between the reporting lenses seamlessly without requiring a different calculation or a different reporting. We need those numbers and approaches to be as consistent as they can for investors, but also for business. It's so important that we're not asking more of companies, and this really does help reduce the reporting burden.
Right. No, it's really interesting in this question of if something isn't material today, but due to regulation and regulatory changes in the future may become, and so therefore is a risk. It's just a tail risk in a sense. And how does one think about incorporating those already so we don't have to go back to it later? Or do you put those aside and say, well, that's for some other time in the future? When we're doing the process now, maybe it's good to do more. And also this really important question, as Nils pointed out, is this increasing demand for this that's going to continue to increase, presumably. And how does one bring that in now? This question of more and more investors looking for the impact going both ways. But so I want to just quickly say to everybody in the audience, you can put questions in the chat. We're going to keep talking here, but please, if you have any questions, please add them in the chat and we'll see if we can get to them. And I wanted to go back to, in the second round of questions, to also look at what everyone's doing outside of their company in sort of the bigger ecosystem. So, for example, for Mr. Roy, you're a GISD Alliance member and you're working on SDG relevant metrics. And I'm wondering about, you talked a little bit about the value you see in those metrics, but I'm wondering about trying to encourage greater adoption or take up of these as a basis, because all of these different efforts then can inform later when we move into moving beyond, let's say, climate, to have stuff out there that can be brought together to start looking at some of these now. So Mr. Roy, maybe what are your thoughts on that?
So I think, like I mentioned, when we started our ESG vision for 2030, I mean, a lot of the stuff around the environment was already out there, and there was quite prescribed. Of course, each company would have some uniqueness about it, but we saw a lot of gaps, for instance, around social. We being a technology company, being a people company, we said that how do we further the cause of digital skilling across the world? So we have opened up our entire library, as you could see, for technical reskilling of our own employee workforce of 300,000. We said, actually, we'll open it up and take a target of skilling 10 million students, college graduates, anybody, and just open up this library free of cost to the environment. So because we think digital skilling is one of the new things which the world will have to pick up to look at the new digital demand coming up. So relating it back to our business, the social side of it, technology for good, right? And we talked about sustainability services, but also looking at collaborating with governments on e-governance programs around health, around education. So these are the things we've said we've actively taken part of the ESG vision. So the social part of it is actually work in progress, but we think looking at our business model, some of these areas need to be crafted out. Some of them are already part of the GISD Alliance framework, and we helped draft that. Looking at things like, of course, women in diversity and is very, very important across. We are already, like I said, 40% of our workforce is women. Looking at hiring people, especially from India, from more backward parts of this country as well, right? And there's 1.3 billion people, a lot of it in rural. Everybody doesn't need to travel to Bangalore to become part of this changing world. They can work in a hybrid model, like I said, sitting in an upcountry town without adding to the urbanization problems which we have. So these are the kind of areas we've actually embedded into our vision document. Taking it out across, we are working with two organizations. We are working with NASSCOM, which is the leading national association for software companies and service companies, and broadening that across other companies as well. We are working, for instance, with the World Business Council on Sustainable Development to have sustainability reporting on hybrid working. So there are no ways today, as you know, in Scope 3, for instance, the travel, business travel, etc. is there, but there's no work from home methodologies available. So we are now trying to work with the WBCSD also to set up work from home sort of protocols that how do you measure in this world work from home, because probably today 40% of the service sector across the world is working from home, but consuming energy and resources. So how do you report on that? So these are kind of things we are looking at. And of course, there's nothing better than to adopt many of these ourselves and lay down that. As they say, imitation is the best form of flattery. So I think we are right up there to take this forward.
That's great. Can I ask you a question? This is a little bit going back to something you said earlier, but when you're working, I presume that the work that you do helping other companies as an IT company, working with other types of companies, I presume you've seen a big growth in demand, and it'd be interesting to hear about that. And also, what sectors that demand is coming from?
Sure. So like I said, this is very pervasive across all sectors. It is something which all our clients realize that this is something not just because there is an investor waiting there, but this is fundamentally good for sustainable business. And this whole linkage of value creation with sustainability, I think this has to be brought right for all companies. So I mean, we talk about future growth. Where's future growth going to come from? If you're a consumer company, it is going to be things about more nutritious products, right? Now, these are the things companies have to think about. And you've seen changes. Some of the leading multinationals in the world have been made towards foods which are less on trans fats, etc. So I think across business model, sustainability has become very, very core to the entire value creation. And in a way, your cost of capital also comes down. I mean, gentleman from Rome had mentioned, right, how the energy bonds are there. And in fact, there is a governance premium. I mean, well-governed companies in a way which are more sustainable actually have a lower beta, which is a very important part of financial value creation. They carry a lower risk premium because there are no surprises. They don't throw up surprises, and their business models are there for the long run. So I think all the elements which go into value creation actually speak to sustainability, and I think that's the sort of message we give to our clients, as well as thinking it from design at the design phase itself, building into a solutions, not as an afterthought, right? And the whole concept of a circular economy, as you know, is right from design phase itself. So I think those are the solutions which we are helping. And like I said, this is pervasive across all sectors. This is not an issue about if you're a high emission company. It is in services, it's in financial services, it's in consumer retail, it's across. And I think in that sense, it bodes well for us.
That's great, thanks. And maybe going over to Mr. DePaoli, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Can you tell us a little bit, because you are also the CFO, you're also the co-chair of the UN Global Compact CFO Coalition. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your work there and does it link in at all to sustainability, target setting and reporting?
Well, when we were working around the idea of creating a CFO coalition within the Global Compact, it was because a lot of things that we're discussing was exactly our job. So we were discussing around how to collect and induce investments to fulfill the financial gap towards SDGs, how to improve the sustainable finance field, how to clearly report what you do, and so on and so forth. So we said, okay, it's our job. Why don't we create a coalition of CFOs that are trying to take this part and to have a clear action angle, not to define something, to help who is defining standards to speak with us, because at the end we will implement in our normal activity all the stuff. So this was the very beginning of the history. At the very beginning, we had a task force. Now it's a coalition because after 2 years, we made a lot of work, and now it's we are now making the second step. What we did and what we want to do. So first of all, we are working around 4 concepts. One is investment thesis. That is exactly what I said. Help companies in different sectors to find investment thesis around sustainability and creating value. Second is to collect through this history a commitment to invest in SDG target, and we have committed ourselves, the first 50 companies, to invest $500 billion in the next 5 years, because we have collected all the single history there. The third objective is to increase the sustainable finance world through SDG linked bond, and we have committed ourselves to reach in 5 years 50% of our finance through sustainable finance, and then to clearly report to every stakeholder this path. This is what we have done. Now we are in the phase to enlarge this coalition, to scale up from 100 companies to 1,000 in the next 2 years, because through this way we want to increase substantially the level of investments and also the sustainable finance that we can create. And so we are on the reporting side, we are open, and so we are waiting for something that help us to clearly report. So this effort at the global level, but each sectors then need a specific kind of reporting to report exactly their activity in their own business.
Great, thank you so much. And maybe, Mr. Bohmstrand, to go back to you, just to talk, I don't know if you do this in your work or not, if you work with companies that you invest in to help them improve their sustainability reporting. I don't know if that's part of your business model. But also if you work with other investors, for instance, with the Swedish Investors for Sustainable Development, and how you work with others. So how you work in sort of the broader universe.
So first, yes, we do work with the companies we invest into. We even have products where we actively tell our clients that we want to invest into companies that perhaps are struggling with this, and we want to engage with them. So a climate engagement product where clients can then see and follow the progress of, can we affect trade change together with the companies that we invest into. It's very much in a collaborative fashion, not in an adversary fashion. And then I think we do work, we were part of the working group on the GISD recommendations that came out. We work also with the Swedish version of this organization. We work with SASB. So, because I think we also do understand that there is a lot of effort that goes into this reporting from the companies, and they have a need for standardization. And I think we're starting to see that now as well, that it's coming, and that will benefit everyone, in my belief. And then I also was very encouraging to hear how we also move a little bit from the E over into the S, because I think the E is naturally very, very important, but I think that the S side is a little bit underinvested, because I think the G side has always been there. No asset manager will ever invest into a company where they don't understand the governance, and as we heard. But the S side is something that I believe that it will be coming, and I think it's really encouraging to hear about it as well from the companies themselves.
I think that's a really good place to end our conversation. We're at the end of our time. I think thank you all so much. This has been a really great conversation. First, in understanding just how much is moving forward and how much is changing, both in corporate behavior and thinking, at least in terms of better aligning first with climate, but maybe there is slowly, and we didn't even discuss issues like biodiversity, other environmental issues as well, which are also really important. And then there's the whole social aspect of this. And then the question, but we see, at least in the climate space, a lot happening that can serve a basis for thinking beyond that. and this importance of the really important work that is going on at IFRS in terms of bringing these different, the many different elements to different efforts together is just so important for, as we said at the very start, for addressing one of the really big challenges of having competing reporting frameworks, and it's really a basis to move forward. And I also think that it's really important to hear how, and for governments to hear and regulators to hear around the world, not just in Europe, how investors, how important this reporting is for the investor side to make markets work better. So that without this sort of reporting, markets can't work as efficiently and effectively as they should. And now that we see demand is shifting, and both for material risks, but also the demand is shifting from investor side and from individuals, from pension funds, we can't do this, and markets won't work as effectively as they're supposed to, or as they can, without having some sort of better reporting and some sort of government lead and policy lead on this. I think that came out really clearly in today's discussion. So there's a lot going on. It's very exciting, but it's just the start of how do we really move this forward into something that's effective and efficient. So I don't know if any of our really excellent panelists want to make any last comments. So if not,
only to thank you for a very well moderated session.
Well, my pleasure. It's really great to be able to work and to talk to all of you. It's just exciting. So I've been enjoying it very much. And thanks again to everybody, to all of you. Thanks for everyone for listening. And I think Barry already put in the chat. Thanks for all of you for sticking with us. And I think Barry put in the chat that the next session is going to start at 10 o'clock. And it'll be an investment presentation by Equatorial Guinea from 10 to 10:45. So go have coffee, take a break, and please come back and join all of us at 10 o'clock for the next session. And thanks again to all of you in the audience and to all of the really wonderful panelists. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. So thanks, and bye, everybody.